Welcome to This is Getting Old. I'm your host, Melissa Batchelor, and today we're going to be talking about the role of place and healthy aging. And I'm joined today by Ryan Frederick, who's the CEO of SmartLiving 360. So welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks, Melissa.
So you and I met through a Brookings meeting. You're interested in place. My dad happened to be a home builder, so I think housing as we age is something we're both interested in. So maybe first of all, I'll just let you introduce yourself and kind of give it your background.
Yeah, no, well, thanks for having Melissa. And it's been fun connecting a week or so ago at the Brookings event. And in fact, the Brookings event was interesting because it raised this whole issue of, do we need to create new places? Do we need to rethink where people can live and how can they thrive? And it's been, in terms of my background, I've been in this field of housing and older adults and the well-being of older adults in the context of housing for about 15 years. So I was really in Silicon Valley before, and then went to Stanford Business School, and then changed and started off by living in a community. When I was the only person under 75 and only male on my wing. So I've got some good some good stories of unsolicited baked goods and so on. But yeah, today, I'm involved in a number of different things with SmartLiving 360 on the consulting side, on the development side of new models, and then like we're here today on the thought leadership side with speaking and writing and really thinking about how can we do this differently.
Okay. And so as I was looking, at your company, SmartLiving 360, you're very interested in kind of this intersection between place and housing and healthy aging. So how did you put those three things together and why are they important?
Yeah, Melissa, it was somewhat accidental. I'm not sure if when I was younger, I was planning like, I'm going to go figure out this housing and healthy aging thing. It happened over a sequence of time and really hit me. But it hit me hard when it did. And I know, just like you, I have this bug around how can we make aging better, and how can we spread these ideas both in our field but also to individuals as it plays out. And so for me, having been an operator of senior housing communities, one of the largest companies in the country, and then also as an investor and a real estate developer, I've seen just the impact that housing has on people in general, but especially as we get older. And you look at the research around it, I know you're well versed in this, is the right place helps us kind of have greater purpose in the things that we do. It helps us with social connection, which is such a big deal before the pandemic, and even a bigger deal, here during the pandemic, where the right place can help us be more physically active. If we're in the right place, it helps us with our financial well-being, making good choices, and also helps us get just more connected into our broader community. So I think that it can get overlooked a lot of times, Melissa, is that people think, a house is a house, and this neighborhood's in that neighborhood, and does it really matter what city I live in? And of course, it always matters, but it can make a big difference, as we age. And as an example, you have, of course, with the pandemic, you've seen situations where certain states haven't been well prepared, and you have older adults in skilled nursing, as an example, that wasn't equipped for what happened, and other states where they were better prepared, and the skilled nursing facilities are better prepared. So this pandemic has been a great reminder that place matters a lot, and are you in the right place for where you are at your given time? Because your needs and desires change, and sometimes that means that you need to reevaluate your place. Not necessarily moving, sometimes just changing your place, remodeling in some fashion, or re-engaging with neighbors. But sometimes it does require, an actual move. So I think it's something that's often overlooked for people.
Right. And I think that, even just this mind shift of like what long-term care looks like, how we deliver different services and goods to different populations. So I actually was on a call before this one, and one of the statements that this lady made was, she's like, I'm not going to go live, or that she said that she probably wouldn't live in a skilled nursing home. And so now America's solution to not living in the skilled nursing home is to be put into assisted living. But yet assisted living, that model is kind of segregated for most communities. And so that's a little bit different than kind of the model that you're proposing. So talk to me a little bit about how you see housing and how kind of the boomers, and maybe generations behind them how are the trends shifting with housing?
Yeah, I think with this pandemic, it's just accelerated things that were going to happen anyway. And you mentioned with your friend, I've heard studies where people say that people fear skilled nursing more than death itself. And which, yeah, you could see how that might be the case sometimes. And a lot of times all of senior housing can get bucketed in the same bucket of skilled nursing while there's a lot of different alternatives. But I think in general, we're on the cusp of big changes, really big changes. And part of it's because what we can do is changing, which I'll get into, but part of it's people are demanding something different, or they can't afford what's out there, or the states that provide some of these services, they can't afford this on an ongoing basis. As a reminder, for long-term care in skilled nursing, if you can't afford it, that's when you fit into the Medicaid bucket, and Medicaid's under a lot of pressure for most states. And so there's been an ongoing effort. Can we keep people healthy in the community and not in institutions? So going back to the developers, and I work with a lot of different groups across the country, investment groups, developers on the consulting side of what I do. And you're seeing people saying, wait a second, can we create just better housing that doesn't necessarily have the same institutional feel of what we've done historically? Can we create environments where we don't necessarily have to have all the services bundled in, but instead bring things in when people need them? And even again with the pandemic, with the use of telemedicine, telehealth, there's more that we can do now in non-medical settings to keep people healthy. So you have a piece of it where the developers and investors are now looking at this differently, and they're seeing a burgeoning market with the boomers aging. And then I think you have older adults in general, whether it's the boomers with silent generation or Gen X, of which I'm part of, the generation below that, just saying we're going to do this thing differently. We're not going to move into what our grandparents did. We're not going to roll in and have every meal the same menu in the same room. No, get me out of here. So I think you're going to see, and you're seeing it, people taking a step back and saying, I'm not going to go into an environment like that unless I really want to or absolutely need it. And I think you're also seeing existing models try to modify what they do to resonate more, with people. And I think that's one of the things, especially around the social connection piece. If there's a way being in community can be an antidote to some of the loneliness and social isolation, well, that's part of the value proposition of some of the existing models. But you're going to see this thing change, and we're in the early days of it. People are going to create new models, and and then the consumers themselves are going to demand it.
Right. I think from our earlier conversations, I think the thing that struck me the most is why has kind of the long-term care housing industry segregated itself when there's so much benefit to having intergenerational housing. And the example that you and I had talked about was, if you have a young working family and they have kids, and maybe the kids don't want to go to daycare, or that's an expensive option. If you had an older adult who was living alone and maybe wanted more social interaction, I mean, matching those two different people together based on what they both want and what their mutual needs are, that's like an idea. That's a model that doesn't really currently exist.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. So there's a community we developed a couple of years ago called the Stories at Congressional Plaza in Rockville, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., close to where you are.
Close. Yeah, close.
And those stories happen. So the whole idea is we think about these new models, what if we flipped them upside down? Why do we have so much that's age restricted, where you take people away from their community? Some people may desire that. There's the Villages in Florida. It's the most successful master plan community in the country, maybe even historically. There's a subset of people that would love to be just in that environment, but there's a lot of people, most people, who don't. And even if you're in that environment, how can you find ways to have that intergenerational connection. So what we did is we built an attractive contemporary apartment building, but we had the vision all along, how can we make it work for people of all ages? And so we had in the design element, we incorporate universal design through the living spaces. So, I mean, subtle things, but they matter. So in some cases, wider doorways, or in the bathroom, slip resistant tiles, and blocking behind the walls for grab bars, and the toilets are just a little bit higher, and the showers have a bench, things like this. It's a bunch of small things, but they all add up. And so if you were younger, you look in, you're not thinking about universal design, you just see an attractive apartment. If you're older and you're thinking about what would be a good place to go, it just checks a bunch of boxes. And then part of the ethos as well is this idea of knowing your neighbor. So how can it not just be a place to hang your hat, but be a spot where it's easier to get to know the people you live around? You don't have to be best friends with them, but at least there's avenues to go do that. So part of it is what we've created is some programming that's done by the staff at the stories, but some of it's just resident driven. We have one resident that started a game night every Thursday night and invited people throughout the building, some people from the outside. And it's neat because it has people of all ages. In the building itself, there's people as old as 90, people in their 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, millennials, young families. And something like game night would bring everyone together in that main room down below. And so one of the cool stories, Melissa, that's come out of it is that you've had a retired teacher who used to teach French with two teenage girls who are learning, this is pre-pandemic, but learn homeschooling for French, but their mom can't read very helpful, and their grandparents are other places, and so they met up, and she one-on-one tutored them on French, but over time it became a burgeoning friendship. Where there was like a surrogate grandparent-grandchild relationship that happened really because of place, because it was easy, because you were proximate, and the culture of the environment you were around just made that happen easier. So yeah, I wish there were more things like that. It seems as though we've just, for historical reasons, created these silos, but I'm hopeful, and I certainly expect to have more places, just make it easier for people of all ages to come together if they so choose, and have it work out better for everyone.
Right. And I think, from a geriatrician and geriatric perspective, having a walkable community it's really important. 95% of older adults live in the community. I think that, society has a very inaccurate viewpoint that they're all in nursing homes, but only 5% of people over 65 are ever going to end up in a skilled facility. And so we really do need to think about how do we build better communities for that. And so, and thinking about that, you also wrote a blog recently called, Who's Your A-Team? Also a Gen Xer, big Mr. T fan.
Yeah, me too.
You said that the question posed to you was, how could I age alone? And so maybe talk a little bit about what your answer to that was.
Yeah, I think I was on a talk show recently, and it's so great to connect with you, Melissa, because it's nice to find people that are thinking through these issues and trying to elevate it for more people's awareness and thinking. And one of the questions came up from someone, basically, how do I do this? I can't do this. How do I do this alone? Do I have the right tools? Is it possible to get the right tools? And my short answer is no, you can't. You can't do this alone successfully. And even if you have a spouse, even if you have adult children in the area, it can be too much of a burden if the idea is, well, my husband will figure it out, or my wife will figure it all out. Like, I think it's important to look around and get a sense of, well, who do I have the right physician helping me? Again, am I in the right place? Am I, is that part of it? What am I doing for social connection? Do I have friends that I have that I could get a chance to walk with regularly or play tennis? On the purpose side, like, where are there things that I love to go do, volunteer, or is there a job that I have that I love that also has people as part of it? So I think this idea of how do we thrive at the end of the day, we're living longer. This idea of 100-year life is no longer a fantasy. And because our DNA is less important than these lifestyle choices, it means, but we can't do it alone. How can we be thoughtful about, do we have the right people supporting us? And ideally, it's reciprocal. How am
Hmm.
I investing in others too? So I'm part of that support system. So I think it's a challenge, I think, for everyone, but it's particularly if you're in more that solo aging category where you don't have adult children, near you, or in your life, or you don't necessarily have a partner as well. I think in those situations, you need to be even more thoughtful about, who is that 18.
Hmm. So I had two thoughts. One, I think a lot of the principles that you're talking about are part of like the blue zones. And I don't know if
Yeah, of
you've heard of their work,
course.
but
Yeah,
I can tell you that principle number one was my favorite because it is to move naturally.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like I was like, good, I don't have to be like training for marathons. But
Right.
movement is important. But and even with this sense of purpose and connecting people, you know, we had talked about this idea of even having a like almost like a dating app, like a matching app between like maybe the younger family and the older adult. So that's another way to pull technology into this. The capable program, Sarah Zant was in that same
Yeah.
meeting with us, and so a lot of the principles that you've talked about are how do we make modifications, or in your case build them in to a brand new residential development so that people can age in place. And by the way, becoming disabled and frail is not a normal part of aging. It's just common because people become socially isolated and then they don't go out, which means they're not walking as much. Um, so I think that all the different things that you're building in, they're simple, but it's amazing that people aren't thinking
It's
about them.
amazing. Yeah, Melissa's amazing. I'm on the board of advisory board of Hopkins School of Nursing, and spent some time with Sarah and visited the communities that or some of the buildings, residential environments that her programs help impact. And people are so excited to be able to stay in their place as opposed to more institutional environments. However, as you mentioned, sometimes aging in place is put in too much of a pedestal as something we should aspire to.
True.
And a lot of times what happens is that there's a nostalgia related to where you've been for a while. On the other hand, it may not be the right setup for you to thrive now.
Hmm.
And you hit on a bunch of them. Like, we're lazy. That's like part of us as humans. We're lazy. We try to fight it. I try to fight it, but we're lazy. And so if it's difficult to go out and be active, we're just not going to be active. If it's difficult to go see people and have those connections, it's less likely to happen. And so that's again why place matters so much, because if you're in a place where it's easy to go out your door and, in your example, get the groceries or go to the a coffee shop and so on, it's a natural course of just life. You're not intentionally exercising. You're just doing life.
Right.
And I think the more that we can create as well as modify place, and then have people have greater options to choose from, the more likely, just like you said, we can have a thrive over a longer period of time. And as you mentioned, it's not inevitable that we're going to be living in a nursing home for 10 years. That's just not how it is. But a lot of it is a function for many of us of these choices we make.
Right. Well, and having choices that fit you and what you want to do, and make it easier for you to make those connections and to be active. Um, so again, I think we're in the mutual fan club with
Yeah.
our work. So also, you mentioned that you were writing a book. Do you want to talk a little
Yeah.
bit about what that's about?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. So it's top of mind. I just turned in the manuscript earlier this week.
Yeah.
My undergraduate major was in electrical engineering, in part to avoid reading and writing. So there's a lot of irony here that I wrote a book. But yeah, I'm excited about it. It is, again, as I've been thinking more and more, just this role of place and healthy aging are so interlinked, and
Mhm.
we can overlook it. So the book is turned in. It's Johns Hopkins University Press as the publisher. It'll come out next fall, so about a year from now. It's crazy how long these things take to get out there. Although
Right.
I'm glad that I wrote it during the pandemic, because had I written it before the pandemic and the pandemic hits, I would have been a little bit of timing. And the pandemic's been helpful, right? It's reminded so much for all of us, like place matters. So the title of the book is called Home is Where the Health Is, a guide to choosing place in the age of longevity. And I've really written it in a way to make it easy for people to engage with stories and help prompt them with the research that's out there now, and then use design thinking principles so people can start to say, well, how would I apply this to my life now? And it doesn't mean when you look at place that you have to move, but it may mean that you should make some modifications to your current place, or think about ways to invest in certain areas that help your overall well-being. So yeah, no, I'm excited about it. And I also do a monthly blog on the SmartLiving 360 website, same content around consumer focused. What's that role of place and healthy aging, and as another way to help share ideas for people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And we'll make sure that we link your website and your blog to the show. And when your book comes out, we'll be happy to have you back and talk more about it and get it into people's hands.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Melissa. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today for This Is Getting Old. If you'd like to know more, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or a related topic you'd like to hear from me about, just let me know. Thanks.